comment on what increase we're going to get, obviously, as an industry, but quite clearly 25% rather than 35% would be much more appreciated. But certainly we have budgeted in our budget for a move of a higher energy cost. Energy costs coupled with water make up about 8% of the company's total bill. We're looking at about 820 odd million rand a year that we spend on electricity. So quite clearly, if there's an additional 10% on top of that, you can work out it's probably additional 80 million rand a year in costs. So for us, it is a very significant factor and one that we'll be watching very closely. I think it's important that we get the balance right, that we don't look for a short-term solution that actually has unintended consequences and knock-on impacts onto the industry. As you know, the industry is a very significant producer of foreign currency, very significant tax contributor, and a very significant employer. So quite clearly, we need to balance these elements.
Got a very strong cash position at a time where most platinum miners had to embark on rights issues and also try and raise capital to survive the credit crisis. What do you put it down to? Is it about being prudent during the good times, or was it about good management?
Well, I think there's two elements to it. First of all, I think we have maintained a conservative balance sheet or a strong balance sheet over time. For my sins, I was a CFO for a number of years, and I was accused many times of having a lazy balance sheet. I have to say, during the economic downturn, I was very grateful for that lazy balance sheet, and to the extent that it really was a strategy for us. Because we didn't, unlike some of our competitors, have a holding company that could look after us. We effectively were an independent company and had to sail our own boat. So from our point of view, we had a very definitive cash preservation strategy that we put in place in 2008, 2009, and I think the results are there for people to see.
Mining royalty kicking in on the 1st of March. What impact is that going to have on the company? How much do you plan to pay for the year? A ballpark figure has been thrown around of about 5% of EBITDA.
Well, I can give you a rand estimate that obviously it very much depends on what your forecast prices are and your forecast rand-dollar exchange rate. Certainly, it's going to come into effect from the 1st of March this year, and for the rest of this financial year, which would take us to the end of June, we'd probably see a pre-tax impact of about 60 million rand in extra costs, based on our forecast view of prices and rand-dollar exchange.
Palladium and platinum at this stage. Interesting to take note that most markets out there are shifting from bigger diesel engines to smaller petrol engines. How do you see the demand playing out for both PGMs and apart from that, the role that China and India will play in the demand picture?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned China and India. I think they're having very significant impacts on the market that I don't think necessarily any market commentators really understood what the impact would be. Quite clearly, 2009 obviously was a very difficult calendar year for the platinum group metals, but I think we saw very strong Chinese jewelry demand that obviously buoyed the prices slightly. At the same time, we also saw the pickup of investor demand come through towards the back end of 2009 and flowing through into 2010. And our outlook now is that the industrial demand will begin to pick up, particularly in the States, moving on to Europe round about the end of 2010 and into early 2011. So I think the prognosis is very good. Your point about movement from diesel into gasoline, I think we are still going to see a good market for diesel in Europe. And as long as the pricing differential in the fuel cost between diesel and petrol is maintained, I think we will still see good, strong diesel growth coming through. But I think you've also got to look at the legislation. The legislation is tightening as well, and tightening legislation means more metal will need to be applied to the applications. And also the number of, shall we say, utilities that are coming under the auspices of PGMs is actually growing. For instance, marine is coming in, train transport is coming in, handheld lawnmowers or leaf blowers, lawnmowers, etc. All those type of elements are coming into it. And quite clearly the market is obviously growing. But the phenomenal growth, I think, is in China and India. And in fact, China outstripped the USA this year, and I think looks poised to become the biggest manufacturer of cars, and could actually reach America in its heyday, which obviously is significant for palladium, and certainly we're looking for palladium prices to react very favorably to this. Coupled with that, I think India, and if memory serves me right, India now is if you look at European car sales, is now only behind Germany in Europe, and it just beats all the other countries in Europe. So again, a significant market that is beginning to grow. So the outlook is extremely positive.